presentation has the power to open doors in your career or to close them forever. It is not an exaggeration to say that the right words, spoken in the right moment, can change not only your professional path, but also the direction of an entire company. The question is never about whether you were born with the gift of eloquence. The truth is simpler and more encouraging. Presenting is not a talent you either have or don't have. It is a skill you can learn, sharpen, and master with patience and deliberate practice. Imagine standing on a stage, lights warming your shoulders, and rows of faces waiting for your first word. For many, that image triggers nervousness, even dread. But here lies the paradox. The very stage we fear is also the stage that transforms us. Public speaking is not a punishment. It is an opportunity, one that anyone can seize. If you've ever thought, "I'm not a natural speaker," let me reassure you. Naturals are made, not born. That is the foundation we will build upon. As you listen to these words, I invite you not only to picture yourself speaking, but to recognize that you already have the seeds of a presenter within you. Every story you've told a friend, every time you've explained an idea at work, every conversation that left someone inspired, these are all fragments of presentation. The difference is that on stage, those fragments are magnified, and magnification requires intention. Before diving deeper, let me pause and ask you something. Where are you right now as you listen to this audiobook? Are you commuting to work, maybe walking in a quiet park, or sitting in your living room with a cup of coffee? Drop a comment below to share your place and time. It helps us see how many lives and voices are tuning in together, forming a community of learners. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. That way, you won't miss any of the powerful lessons we share here on Audiobook Sanctuary. Now, back to the stage, our symbolic stage. Public speaking has been a measure of influence since ancient times. Think of Pericles in Athens, moving citizens with words about democracy. Think of Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg, whose speech lasted just 2 minutes, yet redefined a nation's understanding of freedom. Or Martin Luther King Jr., standing before the Lincoln Memorial, declaring, "I have a dream," words that still resonate across generations. None of these men were born knowing how to capture a crowd. They studied, they practiced, they rewrote their speeches, and above all, they learned to speak with conviction that came from within. What makes presenting so crucial is that it compresses influence into moments. In everyday life, you may have weeks or months to prove your competence. But in a presentation, be it a sales pitch, a company update, or a keynote, you have minutes. Those minutes shape reputations. They can secure funding, inspire employees, or win over skeptical partners. A presentation is like a concentrated beam of light. When diffused, it merely glows. When focused, it cuts through steel. You might wonder then, if the stakes are so high, how do people ever stand the pressure? The answer is preparation, yes, but more than that, it is reframing what a presentation is. Too often we treat it like a performance to survive rather than an opportunity to connect. Let me share the story of Susan Cain, author of Quiet. She is an introvert by nature, someone who avoided the spotlight for much of her life. Yet when she decided to write about the power of introverts, she realized she would have to present her message. Her TED Talk, once feared, is now one of the most viewed of all time. She didn't become extroverted, she became intentional. She realized the stage was not a threat, it was a bridge. That is the central truth for you as well. A presentation is not about acting, it is about aligning. Aligning your message with your values, your story with your audience's needs, your voice with the moment's demands. And like any alignment, it takes adjustment. That is why in this audiobook, we will move step by step from preparation to opening, from body language to handling challenges. Each element is a thread, and when woven together, they create the fabric of what I call a high-impact presentation. Let's stay with the fabric metaphor for a moment. Think of a tapestry in a museum. At first glance, you see the grand image, a battle, a landscape, a scene of daily life. But up close, it is nothing more than threads. Red crossing blue, gold interwoven with black. Presenting works the same way. The audience sees the image. You, the speaker, must weave the threads. Miss one thread, and the pattern weakens. Pull them together, and suddenly you have something worth remembering. So, what are those threads? The first is belief. The belief that you have something worth saying. Without it, words stumble. With it, words soar. Consider Winston Churchill, a man who stuttered as a boy and was far from eloquent. Yet through relentless rehearsal, sometimes repeating sentences dozens of times, he forged the cadence that would later rally Britain through its darkest hour. He did not seek to be perfect. He sought to be heard. The second thread is clarity. Too often, speakers bury their point under jargon, slides, or endless details. But clarity is the kindness of communication. It respects the audience's time. Think of Steve Jobs unveiling the iPhone in 2007. He didn't bury the device under technical specs. He said, "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone." That single line made the world listen. The third thread is connection. Presenting is not broadcasting. It is a dialogue, even if only one person is speaking. You can see it in the eyes of a skilled presenter. They are not throwing words into the void. They are reaching for the listener's heart. This connection is built not through grand gestures, but through authenticity. When Brené Brown spoke about vulnerability, she admitted her own struggles. The room leaned in, because her honesty invited trust. The final thread is practice. No one escapes it. The Roman philosopher Seneca wrote, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." Presenting is no different. Every great orator rehearsed, not once, not twice, but dozens of times. Practice does not make you robotic. It makes you free. Free to adjust, free to breathe, free to connect without being trapped by your notes. As you reflect on these threads, you may still feel a twinge of resistance. Maybe you've spoken before and it didn't go well. Maybe the memory of frozen silence, of stumbling words, of a restless audience still lingers. If so, let me tell you this. Failure is not a verdict. It is rehearsal. Every master presenter has failed, sometimes publicly, sometimes painfully, but they returned. They stood again, and with each attempt, they wove their fabric more tightly. That is the promise I want to leave you with in this first section. Presenting is not about being fearless. It is about being willing. Willing to learn, willing to practice, willing to stand up when your knees shake and your voice trembles, because the message matters more than the fear. We have laid the foundation. Understanding why presentations are transformative and why they are not reserved for the chosen few. They are available to you, to anyone who commits to learning the craft. Now comes the next step, the one that separates the anxious from the confident. Preparation. Because belief alone cannot carry you. The stage belongs to those who prepare before the spotlight shines. Preparation is the quiet rehearsal of triumph. Long before you stand in front of an audience, long before the first word leaves your lips, The groundwork you lay determines whether your message will soar or stumble. The audience sees only minutes of performance, but hidden behind those minutes are hours, sometimes days, of invisible labor. Preparation is the unseen backbone of every powerful presentation. Let me start with an image. Picture an iceberg floating in cold waters. Above the surface, only a fraction glimmers in the sun. Beneath, massive structures remain hidden. A presentation is much the same. The audience only sees the visible part. Your words, your gestures, your slides. But the true strength comes from the massive preparation beneath the surface. Without it, the visible part collapses. The very first step of preparation is not about what you want to say. It's about who will be listening. Too often, speakers rush into crafting slides, writing notes, or memorizing lines without pausing to ask the essential question: who is my audience? An idea delivered perfectly to the wrong crowd will always fall flat. Researching your audience is not optional. It's foundational. Think of Demosthenes, the greatest orator of ancient Greece. Before he addressed crowds, he walked among them, listening to what they cared about, learning their struggles. He knew that unless he connected his message to their lives, his eloquence was useless. Centuries later, the principle remains the same. Presenting is not about displaying your knowledge. It is about serving the audience's needs. So, how do you research an audience? Start with demographics: age, profession, cultural background. A talk for college students will not mirror one for senior executives, but demographics alone are not enough. Go deeper. What are their fears? What motivates them? What language do they use daily? If you are pitching to engineers, speak their technical tongue. If you are inspiring teachers, speak in stories of classrooms and lives touched. Connection begins with respect, and respect begins with understanding. Once you know who is listening, the next step is sculpting what you will say. Every presentation must have a spine, a central structure that holds it together. Without structure, words scatter like leaves in the wind. With structure, they march like soldiers toward a clear destination. There are many frameworks, but one classic remains timeless. The triad of tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. This may sound repetitive, but repetition is the ally of memory. Consider Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech. He repeated the phrase again and again, not because he lacked variety, but because he knew repetition engraves ideas into the heart. Structure is not rigidity, it is generosity. You guide your audience so they never feel lost. Another model is problem-solution benefit. Begin with the problem the audience cares about. Introduce your solution and close with the benefit of acting on it. Sales presentations thrive on this structure, but it also applies to nearly any context. Or consider storytelling arcs: setup, conflict, resolution. Humans are wired for stories. Even in a corporate setting, a narrative will often outshine charts. Let's pause on storytelling, because it is preparation's secret weapon. A story must be chosen carefully. Ask yourself, does this story illustrate my point, or does it merely entertain? A good story is like a hook. It grabs attention and then pulls the message behind it. Think of Steve Jobs again. He rarely launched a product with specs first. He told stories about the clunky music players of the past, about the dream of 1,000 songs in your pocket. The story framed the product, and the product became unforgettable. Once the message is structured, rehearsal begins. And rehearsal is not just repeating lines, it is training muscle memory. Record yourself, watch the playback, Notice the unnecessary gestures, the filler words, the rushed pacing. Athletes record their games not because they enjoy seeing mistakes, but because awareness fuels growth. Presenters must do the same. Rehearsal should also be multi-layered. First, practice alone. Get comfortable with the flow. Then practice with a small audience, friends, family, colleagues. Finally, practice in the actual environment if possible. Walk the stage, test the microphone, click through the slides. The body calms when the unfamiliar becomes familiar. That is why musicians rehearse in empty halls before concerts, not to impress, but to adapt. Here is a story of preparation that echoes through history. In 1962, President John F. Kennedy announced the goal of landing a man on the moon. Years later, during a NASA facility tour, he asked a janitor what his role was. The man replied, "I'm helping put a man on the moon." That is preparation at the organizational scale. Every detail, every role, aligned toward the mission. In presentations, you are NASA. Every detail, from words to slides to timing, must align toward the mission of your message. Of course, preparation is also about anticipating fear. Stage fright is real. It tightens throats, quickens pulses, dries mouths. But fear can be softened with preparation. The more familiar you are with your material, the less room fear has to grow. Remember Churchill again. He often memorized his speeches not word for word, but idea for idea, so that if his memory faltered, he could still improvise within a clear map. Preparation transforms fear into readiness, and yet, some resist preparation, clinging to spontaneity. "I work best when I wing it," they say. Perhaps in small settings that works, but in moments of consequence, spontaneity without preparation is recklessness. True spontaneity blooms best when rooted in preparation. A jazz musician improvises beautifully not because they avoided practice, but because they practiced scales endlessly. Likewise, the speaker who seems effortless on stage has often prepared the most. Let's not forget another part of preparation: visuals. Slides, props, or videos should never overshadow you. They should amplify you. Ask yourself before adding anything visual, does this clarify my point or clutter it? The best slides are simple: one idea, one image, one line of text. Guy Kawasaki, a venture capitalist, once recommended the 10-20-30 rule. No more than 10 slides, no longer than 20 minutes, no text smaller than 30 points. Whether you follow this exact formula or not, the principle remains. Less is more. Finally, timing is part of preparation. Respect your audience's time. A brilliant 20-minute talk is always better than a dragging 40-minute one. Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address was just 272 words. It is still studied today, not for length, but for precision. In preparing your presentation, cut ruthlessly. Ask, if I remove this, does the message still stand? If yes, cut it. Conciseness is not loss. It is focus. Let me share a personal anecdote from a corporate workshop I once witnessed. A manager, nervous about presenting a quarterly update, spent nights rehearsing numbers and charts. But she took time to also craft one central story: how a single customer's life had been improved by the company's service. When she presented, the charts passed by quickly, but the story lingered. Weeks later, people remembered the story, not the statistics. Preparation gave her not only competence, but also confidence. As we close this section, remember, preparation is not glamorous. It happens behind closed doors, often in silence, sometimes in frustration. But it is in this invisible work that visible impact is born. You research your audience, You shape your structure. You rehearse until comfort replaces fear. When you step on stage, the audience will not see the hours behind your words, but they will feel the clarity, the confidence, and the respect that preparation creates. And yet, as thorough as preparation is, it only sets the stage. The true test comes in the very first moments, when you face your audience and open your mouth. How do you capture attention before it drifts? How do you ignite curiosity before skepticism sets in? That is where we turn next. The art of the opening, the moment when silence yields to impact. A presentation rises or falls in its opening moments. In the first 60 seconds, the audience makes a judgment. Do they trust you? Do they care about your message? Do they want to give you their attention or let their minds wander elsewhere? The beginning is not a warm-up. It is the ignition. If you stumble here, you may spend the rest of the talk trying to win back what you lost. If you succeed, you ride a current of curiosity and energy that carries you forward. Think of it like a theater curtain rising. The audience sits in darkness, expectant. When the lights come on, they are ready for something to happen. Those first images, those first lines of dialogue, this is when you either grip them or lose them. The same principle applies in speaking. Your first words are the curtain opening, the spotlight's first glow. How then do you craft a powerful opening? There are several approaches, each suited to different contexts, but all share a single rule. They must matter to the audience, not just to you. One proven technique is the story. Human beings are wired for narrative. Long before we had PowerPoint or microphones, we had stories told around fires. Begin with a short, vivid scene, and your listeners will lean in instinctively. For instance, when Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie gave her TED Talk on the danger of a single story, she began by recounting her childhood in Nigeria, the books she read, and how they shaped her worldview. It was not statistics or definitions that opened her speech, but the texture of her own life. Another opening technique is the question. A well-placed question transforms a passive audience into active participants. Ask something they have likely wondered but never voiced aloud. For example, imagine beginning a business presentation with, "What if I told you that in the next 5 years, 40% of the jobs in this room might no longer exist?" Instantly, you've challenged their assumptions and pulled them into the narrative. Then there is the striking statement. A line so bold, it demands attention. Winston Churchill once began a wartime address with, "The news from France is very bad. No sugarcoating, no gentle easing in, just blunt honesty that demanded the listener's attention." A strong opening statement works because it creates urgency. Humor, too, can be effective, though it must be used with care. The right humorous remark can disarm tension and humanize you. But forced jokes or cultural missteps can backfire, leaving awkward silence instead of laughter. If humor is natural to you, use it. If not, do not force it. Authenticity is more powerful than any punchline. Let me tell you a story about one of the most famous openings in history. In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. took the podium during the March on Washington. He began not with, "I have a dream." That refrain came later. His opening words were, "I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation." Simple, direct, and expansive, it immediately framed the day as a monumental moment. From the start, he placed his audience in history's embrace. But a powerful opening is not only about words, it's also about presence. The way you step onto the stage, the pause before you begin, the steadiness of your gaze, all these elements communicate before you speak. Too many presenters rush into their first sentence, tripping over nerves. Instead, consider silence as your ally. Step forward, breathe, look at your audience, and then begin. That pause builds anticipation. There is also the power of contrast. Begin with something the audience believes, then challenge it. For example, most people think the biggest fear in life is death, but studies show it's public speaking. Laughter follows, and then curiosity. The audience feels seen and surprised at once. Now, let's address a common trap: overloading the opening with details. Some presenters begin by introducing themselves at length, explaining credentials, or outlining every topic they will cover. This drains energy. Remember, you do not need to prove your worth in the first sentence. You prove it by delivering value as you go. A simple introduction, name, role, purpose is enough. The opening must be for them, not for you. Think of Barack Obama's keynote at the 2004 Democratic National Convention. Few people knew him then. He could have spent minutes establishing his resume. Instead, he began with a personal story of his immigrant father and Kansas-born mother, tying his life to the broader American narrative. It was not about proving credentials, it was about creating connection. Visuals can also play a role in an opening. A striking image on the screen, a meaningful object held in your hand. These can anchor the first impression. But like humor, they must serve the message, not distract. Imagine beginning a talk on environmental sustainability by holding up a clear jar filled with polluted water. Before you even speak, you've set the emotional tone. Preparation meets artistry in the opening. You must rehearse your first sentences until they flow without hesitation. The beginning is no place for fumbling. Actors rehearse their first lines relentlessly because they know the audience's trust is won or lost in that instant. So should you. Here is a helpful technique. Craft two versions of your opening. The first is your planned opening, the story, question, or statement you have prepared. The second is a spontaneous acknowledgement of the moment. For instance, if you step on stage after a technical delay, you might say, "It seems even microphones get nervous on big days." This small, adaptive line shows presence of mind. But then, immediately, pivot to your prepared opening. This blend of flexibility and preparation makes you appear both authentic and confident. Consider also the rhythm of delivery. Speak slightly slower at the start. Nervous speakers often speed up, racing through the opening as though to escape it. Instead, savor it. Speak like someone with something worth saying. Confidence is not the absence of nerves. It is the control of pace. A final note on openings. They must align with the rest of your presentation. If you open with drama and then fall into monotony, the effect is jarring. If you begin with humor but switch into a grim lecture, you create dissonance. Your opening should be a doorway that naturally leads into the room of your talk. Think of it as an overture in an opera. It hints at themes that will unfold later. Let me share one last story, this time from the world of business. Howard Schultz, former CEO of Starbucks, once gave a presentation about the company's turnaround after its struggles in the mid-2000s. He began not with charts or financials, but with a memory. Walking into a Starbucks store where the aroma of coffee, the very soul of the brand, was missing. That sensory image captured both the problem and the urgency. The audience immediately understood, not with numbers, but with senses. As we close this section, remember, your opening is the invitation. It is the moment you ask your audience, silently and powerfully, "Will you come with me on this journey?" If you respect their time, spark their curiosity, and show them you are present and authentic, they will say yes. Now that we have mastered the opening, the question becomes, how do you sustain that energy? How do you not only hold attention, but deepen it, using your body, your voice, and your very presence as instruments of influence? That is where we now turn. The art of voice, body, and presence. Once the first words have landed and the audience has decided to listen, the next challenge emerges: sustaining their attention. This is where your body, your voice, and your presence become as important as your message. The truth is, people don't just hear what you say, they feel how you say it. Your gestures, your posture, the rise and fall of your tone, even the way your eyes move across the room, all of it sends signals. And often, these signals communicate louder than words. Think of the stage as a canvas. Your words are the paint, but your body and voice are the brush strokes. Without the brush strokes, the paint is lifeless. With them, the picture comes alive. Audiences are not only intellectual, they are visceral. They react to energy, rhythm, and authenticity. The great presenters know this. They don't simply inform, they embody their message. Let's start with body language. Research suggests that over half of human communication is nonverbal. When you stand on stage, your body speaks before your mouth does. If you slouch, cross your arms, or shift nervously, the audience senses insecurity. If you stand tall, shoulders relaxed, chest open, they sense confidence. Power and vulnerability are not opposites. They can coexist in posture. Confidence does not mean rigidity. It means openness, a posture that says, "I am here and I belong." Gestures amplify meaning. They should flow naturally, not mechanically. Pointing upward when speaking of vision, opening arms wide when speaking of inclusion, leaning slightly forward when stressing importance. These are physical cues that anchor your words. But beware of overuse. A hand chopping every sentence becomes distracting, like a drum that never stops pounding. Think of your gestures as punctuation marks. They highlight, they pause, they emphasize. Consider the example of John F. Kennedy. In his inaugural address, he often raised his hand slightly, palm outward, as if offering his words to the nation. It was a gesture of giving, of extending himself. Or recall Oprah Winfrey's acceptance speech at the Golden Globes. Her hand movements expanded as her message grew, her physical presence matching the emotional crescendo. Their bodies were not separate from their words. They were one. Now, let us move to voice. The voice is the most flexible instrument you carry. Monotone kills attention faster than silence. But variation, volume, pitch, pacing, creates music. Think of it as conducting an orchestra. There are moments to crescendo when passion demands volume. There are moments to decrescendo when intimacy demands softness. And there are pauses, the rests in music, where silence becomes thunder. One of the most powerful tools a speaker can use is the pause. After making a key point, stop. Let silence sink in. The human brain needs moments to process. Martin Luther King Jr. knew this instinctively. After declaring, "I have a dream," he often paused, allowing the words to echo not only in the crowd's ears, but in their hearts. The pause told them, "This matters." Pacing is another critical tool. Too fast, and the audience feels rushed, overwhelmed. Too slow, and they drift away. Effective pacing is dynamic. It speeds up to energize, slows down to emphasize. Barack Obama mastered this rhythm. His deliberate pauses, his measured sentences, created a sense of weight. His speeches were not rushed rivers. They were measured tides. Eye contact completes the triangle of presence. Without it, you are a voice floating in the void. With it, you are a human being connecting. Do not scan the room mechanically, like a lighthouse. Instead, linger. Hold the gaze of a single person for a few seconds, then move to another. The effect is intimacy. Even in an audience of thousands, people feel you are speaking directly to them. Bill Clinton was famous for this skill. People often said that when he looked at you, it felt as if you were the only person in the room. But presence goes beyond techniques. Presence is the fusion of body, voice, and authenticity. You cannot fake it. Audiences have a sixth sense for insincerity. They may not analyze it consciously, but they feel it. True presence comes from alignment, when your inner conviction matches your outer expression. That is why preparation matters. It frees you to be authentic rather than anxious. Let's take the example of Malala Yousafzai, the young activist who survived an assassination attempt and later addressed the United Nations. Her voice was not booming, her gestures not theatrical, yet her presence was undeniable. Why? Because her conviction was pure, her message lived in her bones. Presence is not about style. It is about truth expressed through style. Of course, even the most seasoned speakers face challenges in maintaining presence. Nervous habits creep in, pacing aimlessly, fiddling with notes, speaking too softly. The key is awareness. Record yourself, as painful as it may be, and notice. Then adjust. Replace nervous pacing with purposeful movement. Step forward when you emphasize. Step back when you invite reflection. Replace filler words with pauses. Replace smallness with grounded posture. An old story tells of Demosthenes, again, who practiced speaking with pebbles in his mouth to overcome a speech impediment. He rehearsed by reciting over the sound of waves, training his voice to project. His methods may sound extreme, but his results were legendary. The principle remains. Mastery comes from training the body and voice to serve the message. Here is a practical tip. Think of your voice and body as highlighters, not decorations. They exist to underline your ideas, not distract from them. A whisper at the right moment can carry more weight than a shout. A single hand extended can be more powerful than flailing arms. The artistry lies in restraint as much as in expression. Now let's add the element of energy. Energy is contagious. If you are bored by your own message, the audience will be too. If you radiate enthusiasm, not the fake, exaggerated kind, but genuine engagement, they will mirror you. Neuroscience calls this emotional contagion. We catch moods from one another. A presenter's energy sets the emotional climate of the room, but energy is not always loud. Think of the Dalai Lama. His presence is gentle, his voice calm, yet the rooms he enters feel alive. Energy is not volume, it is vitality. Find the level that fits your personality. If you are naturally animated, channel it with control. If you are naturally calm, let that calmness be your strength. The key is not to imitate, but to inhabit. The final piece of presence is congruence. When your words, body, and voice contradict each other, the audience trusts the body, not the words. If you say, "I am confident," but your shoulders slump, they believe your shoulders. If you say, "This is exciting," but your tone is flat, they believe your tone. Congruence builds trust. Incongruence breeds doubt. So, let's put this all together in a scene. Picture a leader announcing a bold vision to her company. She steps forward with shoulders back, stands tall, and looks at her employees with steady eyes. Her voice rises as she speaks of opportunity, then softens as she speaks of shared responsibility. She pauses, lets the room breathe, then continues with renewed strength. Her hands move naturally, open when she invites, firm when she asserts. The words themselves are clear, but it is the delivery that electrifies the room. That is the power of body, voice, and presence aligned. As this section closes, let me emphasize one truth. Presence is not about performance. It is about connection. It is not about pretending to be someone else. It is about amplifying who you already are. When your voice, body, and authenticity work together, you do not just speak, you resonate. And yet, even with presence, even with preparation, challenges will come. A tough question may throw you off. A technical glitch may derail your flow. A skeptic in the audience may cross their arms and shake their head. How do you not only survive such moments, but turn them into opportunities for trust? That is where we now journey, into the art of handling challenges with grace. No matter how carefully you prepare, no matter how polished your delivery, every presenter eventually faces the unexpected. It might come as a tough question from the back row, a technical failure when the slides refuse to load, or even the subtle resistance of an audience that seems disengaged. These moments are not signs of disaster. They are tests of resilience. And in truth, the way you handle challenges often leaves a stronger impression than the smoothest part of your speech. Let us begin with questions. The lifeblood of dialogue, but also the source of anxiety for many speakers. When an audience member raises a hand, uncertainty enters the room. Will the question challenge your credibility? Will it expose a gap in your knowledge? The instinct may be to defend, to rush, or to deflect. But the wiser path is to see questions not as attacks, but as invitations. An audience member who asks a question is saying, "I am engaged enough to want more." That is not hostility, it is interest. Consider how leaders handle questions in press conferences. The strongest ones rarely react with hostility, even to critical queries. Instead, they pause, breathe, and answer with respect. If the question is sharp, they soften their tone. If it is confused, they clarify patiently. When you respect the questioner, the rest of the audience respects you. What about questions you cannot answer? Honesty is always safer than pretense. You might say, "That's an excellent question, and I don't have the data on hand right now. Let me follow up after this session." This response does not weaken you, it strengthens you. It shows humility, authenticity, and the courage to admit limits. Audiences forgive ignorance. They rarely forgive arrogance. Then there are the interruptions. The person who challenges you mid-sentence. The skeptic who crosses arms and shakes their head. These can be intimidating, but they are also opportunities. Address them calmly, without sarcasm. Acknowledge their perspective briefly, then return to your main point. For example, "That's a fair concern, and while there are different views, here's why this matters." By bridging instead of battling, you keep the energy constructive. Let's talk about technical glitches. Picture this. You walk on stage, click the remote, and nothing happens. The slide stays blank. Panic rises. But here is the truth. The audience does not care about the slides as much as you do. They care about the message. When Steve Jobs launched the iPhone in 2007, even he experienced a demo failure. His solution? He pivoted seamlessly into storytelling until the glitch resolved. The audience barely noticed because his presence carried them through. Preparation here means rehearsing without props. Practice your talk as if the projector will fail. That way, if it does, you are not trapped. You can still deliver with your voice, your body, and your conviction. Slides should never be a crutch. They are supplements. If you can stand without them, you are truly ready. Another challenge comes from disengagement, when eyes glaze, phones appear, and attention drifts. In these moments, resist the urge to scold. Instead, re-engage. Ask a direct question. How many of you have faced this in your work? Raise your own hand to invite theirs. Tell a surprising story or share a startling statistic. Shift your energy. Often, disengagement is not hostility. It is simply fatigue. A burst of novelty, interaction, or humor can reset the room. Let me give you an example from history. Franklin D. Roosevelt, during his fireside chats, often faced the challenge of a weary nation. Listeners were burdened by depression, war, and uncertainty. He could have lectured them with data, but he chose empathy. He spoke conversationally, saying, "My friends," as if addressing each family directly. His ability to sense the emotional state of his audience and respond with warmth made his words effective. He turned challenge into intimacy. In business contexts, challenges also appear as skepticism. Imagine presenting a new strategy to executives who resist change. If you bulldoze ahead, you alienate them. Instead, acknowledge their concern. I know this may sound risky. Change always carries risk. But here's what we gain if we take this step together. By validating their perspective, you disarm resistance. You are not ignoring their doubts. You are guiding them through. Now, let us talk about the internal challenge, your own nerves. Even after hours of preparation, even with experience, adrenaline surges when you face an audience. Your voice may tremble, your hands may shake. But remember, adrenaline is not the enemy. It is energy, and it can be channeled. Athletes feel it before a race, actors before a premiere, leaders before a decision. Instead of fighting it, breathe deeply, slow your pace, and let that energy fuel your passion. One technique is reframing. Instead of thinking, "I am nervous," tell yourself, "I am excited." The physiological symptoms are the same: racing heart, sweaty palms. But the story you attach changes everything. A study at Harvard Business School found that speakers who reframed nerves as excitement were rated as more persuasive and confident than those who tried to suppress their anxiety. Your mind shapes your body. There is also the challenge of time. Sometimes you are given less than expected. Perhaps another presenter went long, and now you have 10 minutes instead of 20. The key here is prioritization. Do not rush through all your points. Instead, choose the one or two most essential ideas and deliver them with clarity. Better to leave the audience with one strong memory than 10 rushed fragments. Challenges, then, are not interruptions of the presentation. They are part of it. They reveal who you are under pressure. When you respond with calm, honesty, and adaptability, you show leadership. And leadership, in many ways, is the hidden essence of every great presentation. Let me close this section with a story of resilience. In 1988, Ronald Reagan was giving a speech in Berlin when a balloon popped loudly in the crowd. The sound was sharp, startling, echoing like gunfire. The Cold War still cast shadows, and tension was high. Reagan paused, smiled, and said, "Missed me." The crowd erupted in laughter. What could have been fear became connection. His calm turned a challenge into a moment of humanity. This is the mark of a master presenter. Not perfection, but poise. Not the absence of difficulty, but the art of using difficulty as a bridge. When you face a tough question, a glitch, or a restless audience, remember, these are not enemies. They are your chance to demonstrate authenticity, empathy, and control. We have journeyed from the power of presentations to preparation, from openings to presence, and now to challenges. The fabric is complete. But there remains one final stitch, the reflection that ties it all together. The lasting truth that remains after the lights dim and the room empties. Let us close with that. A presentation does not end when the last slide fades or when the final applause echoes. Its true measure lies in what lingers. Long after the details are forgotten, the essence remains. A successful presentation is not one where the speaker shines brightest. It is one where the message continues to glow in the hearts of the audience. Think of the talks you remember from years past. Chances are, you don't recall every fact or statistic. What you remember is a phrase, a story, a feeling. Perhaps it was the way a leader made you believe in a possibility. Perhaps it was a moment of laughter that broke tension. Perhaps it was a line that still whispers to you in quiet hours. That is the real goal. Not perfection, but resonance. So let us restate the heart of this journey. High-level presentation skills are not about dazzling performance. They are about authentic connection. They are not measured by applause, but by impact. Anyone can learn them, refine them, and grow through them. What is required is belief, preparation, presence, and resilience. And here is the challenge I place before you. Do not wait for the big stage. Do not wait for the perfect moment. Begin now. Practice in meetings. Share stories at family gatherings. Volunteer to present in small groups. Each step is a rehearsal for the larger stage. Great speakers are not born. They are built, moment by moment, opportunity by opportunity. Imagine yourself, months from now, standing under the lights. The room grows quiet. Dozens, maybe hundreds of eyes rest on you. Instead of fear, you feel readiness. Instead of trembling, you feel steady. You speak, and the words land, not because they are flawless, but because they are true. And when you finish, the applause may fade, but the message endures. That is the gift you can offer. Not yourself, but the idea you carry. As the Roman philosopher Cicero once said, "To influence others, you must be moved yourself. Let your conviction guide you. Let your preparation ground you. Let your presence carry you. And when challenges come, as they will, let your composure prove the strength of your message." So, picture it one more time. The lights rise. The audience waits. This is not just a performance. It is an offering. And in that moment, you are not merely speaking. You are giving an experience, an inspiration, a truth that might ripple through lives in ways you will never fully know. High-level presentation skills do not make you someone else. They make you the strongest, clearest version of who you already are. And that, in the end, is the ultimate success of the stage.